Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
Katie, are you Dr. Coach Katie or Katie? How do I, first of all, congratulations. But I don't know how to refer to you now. What's the proper nomenclature?
Well, a lot of people like Queen, if you want to do that.
Okay. Yes.
But the official title would be Coach Katie, PhD. That's the way to do it. Or, for most people, I'd actually say, please just call me Katie and don't make a big deal about this whole thing.
Would you be uncomfortable if I called Dr. Clayton? Would that?
Dr. Clayton is my grandfather, actually. He's a wonderful dentist. So
Okay, good. You're not a dentist. Okay.
No. But yes, big week for me. Finished up my PhD on Tuesday, so I defended my dissertation, and it's funny that, the topic that we're going to get into today, I guess I'll give it away right now, is life stress. And since I defended my PhD on Tuesday, my life stress has gone down so much. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this topic, having made it through a really stressful time. Well,
congratulations. It's a huge one. I know it's been so much work over how many years? It's been a bunch of years, but not that many years. You went through it pretty quickly though too. So
about 5 years. Yeah. So it went by really fast.
Yeah, that's a good chunk. And that's a fast PhD. That's a Katie Clayton PhD timeline, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It did feel a lot like 5 Ironmans, I would say, is maybe the rough equivalent thing, but it was good. I learned a lot, and yeah, excited for the next chapter now, and excited to get into today's topic.
But first, of course, we always start with our training and coaching insights. So I know you've been super busy learning all kinds of stuff on PhD stuff, but I bet that you also learned a few things from a coaching perspective this week as well, too.
I did, yeah. And I feel like we haven't sat down and done this in a couple weeks. So I have a lot of insights, and I keep having these insights and ideas, and I'll just be like, oh my gosh, I'm mid-run. I think of something and I have to write it down. So bear with us as we get through a lot of insights today. But the first one I'm going to share is I talked about last podcast about the power of sleep. I'd like to get a little bit more specific and talk about the power of napping. So I am not usually a napper. Like, I've not historically been a napper. But from time to time, when I'm really behind on sleep, I've found that there's something really magical about that 20 to 30 minute power nap, especially after a big activity. So we find that, like, if you do a really big workout in the morning, for example, get back, eat a big lunch, your body does start to sort of shut down into this kind of I'm very tired state. And honoring that is a really amazing way to speed up your recovery and actually allow you to have a reasonable rest of the day without feeling totally wrecked by your workout. So obviously this is pretty hard to do if you're working a full-time job, but I think on the weekends, if you can figure out how to weave in those little 20 to 30 minute naps here or there, I think that's one of the best bang for your bucks. We've talked about recovery really just being about food and sleep. And if you can't get those 8 hours or good quality sleep, capitalizing on that nap is a really good way to go.
Yeah, I love that. And I can say, speaking from a master's perspective, and it's the old cliche, like, you just don't recover like you used to when you're a master's. But you know what? It's true. And so, yeah, I found myself, like today, for example, I went for an 8-mile run, and that honestly, it kind of tires my central nervous system out. And so I built in a nap before this podcast today because I need to be my best at the podcast, or it could be like another workout. And I just took a 30-minute nap, set my alarm, and off I went. So
totally, yeah. So get those naps in. Think about it just like you think about your protein shake in the shower and hitting your race-based intervals. You want to think about those naps. Insight number 2 for me. So it's nearing the end of March. The days are finally getting longer. I think we're all probably pretty happy about daylight savings by now, and we're all probably feeling a little bit better than we were in the depths of winter. So something I think our athletes should really be thinking about is, now that the weather is allowing us to get outside, we should try to get outside for workouts when you can. And I think this is important because I have a lot of athletes who often just get so accustomed to sitting on the trainer and running on the treadmill that they're actually a little bit nervous about getting outside. It's different gear and different variables, and where am I going to go? And they think that, well, maybe since there aren't as many variables that are controlled, it won't be the same level of quality training. But a really important reminder is that you're going to be racing outside, and so you should be getting out as often as you can. And obviously, sometimes if you're like exercising really late at night or really early in the morning, it's going to be easier to stay inside. But on the weekend, if you get a day where, let's say it's 50 degrees, it's borderline, you might want to do your 3-hour ride on the trainer because you can have your plate of waffles and other treats with you and all these different things. If you can get outside, now's the time to do it, just because that's going to get you more durable and more ready to tackle the elements on race day.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about that a lot, about this idea of outdoor durability, that most of us are indoor cats. And so we're just not used to being out in the wind and the rain and the sun. And so I think the most common comment we hear from races. People say, oh, today was so hot today. And we go, by the way, it's hot every single day. You just don't go outside at noontime. So I love this point of like, get out while you can. And then sort of following that as well too, I've got people, same thing, like they've been on their trainers, they're starting to get outside, and I'm getting people saying, so should I purchase my bike now? I'm like, yes, when you get outside, start riding the bike that you're going to race on. So either purchase your bike you're going to use for race season or have your current bike serviced.
Mm-hmm. And actually, speaking of that, we are getting for many people inside that 12 weeks of a specific prep phase that we've been talking about. So you definitely want to have that dialed like yesterday. Think about it big time, even if you're a little bit further out from your race. As soon as you get outside, let's get all that gear set up.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great point.
Point number 3 for me, I've had a lot of athletes who are asking about more specific nutrition guidelines, and also want to shout out to a lot of our athletes who have said, you know what, I think I actually do need to talk to a professional on this, who have started working with a dietitian. I think that's an amazing resource to have in your toolkit. And then we also do have an episode with Kate Ward, who's an incredible PhD and registered dietitian, to talk to us about nutrition. But I just wanted to give maybe 4 golden rules of triathlete and endurance nutrition while we're here, because a lot of people sometimes just don't even know where to start. And if you just want to think about a few things to incorporate, maybe this is something we could cover. So number 1, when you're training really, really heavy, think about just every single day trying to get 3 meals and 3 snacks in. So it's like a meal, then a snack, then a meal, then a snack, and then a meal, and then a snack. And sometimes just thinking about that 3 plus 3 is the easiest way to make sure that you're just not going really long times without fueling. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't really know how to structure this around workouts, but start with 3 and 3. That's a really, really good place to be. Second rule is, I would say, avoid fasted training. So that's not eating before you work out. Even if you're working out really early in the morning, just getting down like a banana or some juice or something like that. That's going to lower your cortisol levels. That's going to help you get a lot more out of your workout. You could even like take a gel in the first mile of your run, something like that. It doesn't need to be a lot, but just avoid that fasted training. We've talked about it before, but really want to drive home that that's not that useful. Number 3, think about prioritizing carbs before you train, and then carbs and protein immediately after, and then incorporate those healthy fats throughout the day. So that's kind of just thinking about your macros. Carbs are going to be your primary fuel source as an endurance athlete. So if you just are trying to decide what to do, look at those nutrition facts, see what has a lot of carbs, take that before. And then last one is, if you're doing any activities that are over 75 minutes, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're doing that. And this also counts as like, okay, let's say you have a 30-minute swim and a 45-minute run. If you're doing those back to back, that is a 75-minute activity. That's where you want to incorporate some fueling during. So think about taking in carbs as you're going throughout that activity. You're just going to feel a whole lot better. And shout out to some of my athletes who have been nailing this so well. I just love getting Training Peaks comments about, wow, I fueled so much better than I ever have before, and I felt amazing. I truly believe that this is the secret to unlocking your best performance. But if you think you're missing the mark on it, you can get some blood work done. You can supplement as needed. You can loop in a dietitian. There's a lot of different things to do. But yeah, just really, really want our athletes to nail this. So I thought I'd go over those golden rules. All right, my very last one. You're never going to believe this, Jim, but I actually have an insight related to swimming. So normally we push all of our swimming stuff into listener questions, and we begrudgingly answer questions about swimming. But I have recommitted to swimming, mostly because I was in California last week and the pools are outside. So I'm like, great, I can get vitamin D, I can work on my Speedo tan, and I can get my swim in. But I think something really interesting that I was thinking about is, usually we talk about swimming being, part about your fitness and then part about your technique. So we do a lot of work with technical 50s, swimming with gear, trying to nail that technique. But I think maybe even a third of how swimming works for you is actually something else. So I have thought recently a lot about the idea of mobility, and how mobility is really, really related to how efficient you're going to be when you're in the water. And I think I noticed this because I've been having some sort of upper back really tightness, especially on my left side. And Jim, you and I have always noticed that my stroke is a little bit weird on the left side. I have a little bit of trouble really, really reaching and getting a high elbow on the left side as much as I do on the right side. I think it's just anatomically, that's kind of how I'm built. My left side's a little bit tighter. And recently I've started working with a physical therapist and a strength trainer. And I did this one session where my physical therapist did a ton of work on my left shoulder and then actually my left pec, so both front and back, that whole area. She did a bunch of cupping, she moved things around, and then I went directly into my swim from there. And it was like a switch had flipped. It was crazy how much higher I could get my left arm going. Wow. And I was knocking off 50s, even though I've been very inconsistent with my swim, as we know. I was knocking off 50s just as fast as I'd ever done them, just because I had a lot more mobility. So everyone's going to have different challenges when it comes to mobility. For some people, it might be hips. For some people, it might be back. For some people, it might be shoulders. But if you can really work on that, that's a really nice way to unlock some swim speed. And again, send us videos. We can tell you what we think is up with your stroke. But I think I hadn't realized how much mobility could actually be a big part of that.
Yeah, I love that. I really think about that. But we've seen that a lot on pool deck a lot. We see people struggling, particularly with that rotation, is that it tends to stem from that really tight back that we get, probably from sitting all day long or typing all day long and being on the bike. Was she working on your scapula area too as well?
Yep. Yeah. So scapula and then also pecs. Like that surprised me so much how I didn't even know that I had a pec minor, but that's apparently a muscle that can get quite tight. And she worked on it maybe for the first time in my entire life. So I have some really intense bruising patterns from all of that, but I have a lot more mobility. So it's great. Okay. So those are my insights. I am passing it over to you, Jim. What are your insights for the last couple of weeks?
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Right. It's been a while here. So yeah, we're just starting to see athletes are getting super fit. So people are coming out of this winter training. People started in maybe November, December, and now we're into March, and people are getting fit. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting that we can say that right now because I feel like early on, our first couple of podcasts, it was the beginning of the season, and we're like, okay, do zone 2, trust the process. We promise it's going to work. But now we're actually seeing it work, and we've seen it, but every single year, I think it continues to surprise us how much our athletes will improve. So I've had a ton of fun seeing that as well.
Yeah, I recently had 2 athletes who did their 2 by 10 minute run test. And both of them improved their threshold run by 30 seconds. I was like,
wow,
whoa, this is a lot, And then had another athlete who increased their FTP by 40 watts.
Wow.
I was like, is this correct? But the key is, we tested these athletes like last year. And I mean, I typically test less than probably some other coaches because I'd like to see a big chunk of training in place before, and just to, say, hey, be patient with it, right? So I won't test maybe as often maybe as other people do, but it is fun when you start to, maybe leave 6 months in between a test and you go, oh my gosh, that's a huge jump. And so I have more tests coming up for more athletes, and I'm super psyched to see the results.
Yeah, I am too. I have quite a few tests on deck, and I'm also about race sims. I feel like that's another place to say like, okay, what actually is your race pace, and seeing like, oh, this is a pretty good pace. That's all really, really exciting for us as coaches.
Yeah. And if we can do lactate testing in a lab, performance lab somewhere, that's like fantastic. But, these 2 by 10 minute run tests, these, FTP tests, there's a lot of variables that we can't control. And, life is very dynamic. So it's kind of backyard science. So that's another reason why we sort of leave a bunch of time between the 2 tests. But they get the job done. They do show us you are getting fit. It's super exciting. And then the other way you can do it, we just had our local 5K up here, sort of the kickoff of the running season. And that's another, really encourage athletes to find your local 5K, find a local 10K, or even a sprint triathlon, and go out and take your Winter Fitness for a test run. And that's a great way to do organic testing.
I love that. Yeah, I think I have a lot of athletes who have signed up for these short races, sort of even just to experience racing too. And we've said this time and time again, like if you race a lot, you'll get better at racing. So you get a lot of benefits from this. You get the test and then you get the race experience. That race mindset is something that, you don't have to do 2 half Ironmans to get ready for your A race. Just do a 5K and then you'll be good to go.
So like your swimming, I'm sort of not much of a runner. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with the running, but I have done a little bit of running recently. And I was running down a long hill the other day in my usual loop. And I remembered I've prescribed these before, and what they're called aerobic downhill intervals. And I'm not exactly sure where I got that concept, but once you get a decent run base, you can start to do this. It's kind of a run play. And so it's this game of how fast can you run down the hill while still maintaining like a mid-zone 2 heart rate. So you can start playing with like your foot turnover, or you can play around with your lean. You can, for me, a lot of times arm swing is a big one for me. And also it's easy to overstride on the downhill. So focus on getting that foot underneath your hip going down the hill. But really the whole point is like, how fast can I run down this hill while I'm still in my zone 2 heart rate? And it's super fun. And you can just start by doing this by 1 minute downhill or 2 minute downhills. Or for me, this was a long downhill. So it's just fun to you crest over the top of the hill and you look down at your watch and you go, okay, here's my heart rate. And how fast can I possibly run down this hill? It's just fun. I don't know. Have you done these before, right?
I feel like I've done this organically without actually making a workout out of this. But I'm curious, would you say this is good for pavement running, dirt road running, trail running? How have you been incorporating it?
Mostly on the road. It's probably good for dirt. I don't know if I'd try this on the trails per se because I'm just not coordinated enough. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, mostly on the roads I'm trying this. And so, yeah, it's a just different way to get some speed work in. And I think one of the main points is that always thinking at, heart rate and FTP and thresholds. At the end of the day, in a triathlon or a run race, it's like who goes the fastest, right? It's all about velocity. And so what I like about this is a sneaky way to get speed work in sort of a very low level, easy way. But it also promotes like, how do I feel when I go fast? Like, how do I feel like going fast, running or going fast, biking or going fast, swimming it's a different feel, right? So this just helps you get into that mode.
I love that. Yeah. And can I piggyback with an unplanned insight that I just thought of as you were saying this?
Well, it's been weeks, so let's do it. Let's pile on.
So yeah, this idea of practicing going fast is a really good way of like understanding how to race fast. I've recently been doing a little bit of back to swimming, a little bit of swim work with fins on, which I think is a really close analog actually to downhill aerobic running intervals. Because if you swim really fast with fins on, you're going to go so fast, so much faster than you could swim without fins. But then you get this feeling of like, wow, what does it feel like to do, 100 yards, 15 seconds faster than I normally can do it? And then eventually kind of working up to just feeling that turnover and cutting through the water like that. I think you could think about incorporating those too. So feel fast. That's why we say it's great to do gear. That's why it's okay to be doing these fast downhill intervals. And it's like part of you is like, am I cheating? Am I getting a little extra boost here? But no, you're actually just getting a lot of practice being fast.
It's so funny you mention that because I almost put that in the coaching insights is that it's just the same way with fins, or if you use sometimes they have these bungees that you can swim against in the pool, and then when you turn around, they pull you back. And my first swim coach, he was a D1 swim coach, and he said, you have to go fast in order to feel that fast. So if you want to be a faster swimmer, you just have to get yourself in some position, whether it's fins or the bungee, whatever it is. You got to feel like the water feels differently on your head, on your body when you are, like you say, you're going 10 seconds, 15 seconds per 100 faster. It just feels so much different. You have to do that. And I think that sort of also on that, so another one is that I was doing some intervals with our friend Jay Schmitty, and she was on her TT bike and I was on my road bike behind her, and she was just going so fast. And it was just, my heart rate was up and my watts were kind of down and I was kind of discouraged, but I also realized like, I'm just working hard at going fast. She was going to 23, 24, 25. And that's generally not the way I ride a road bike, 15, 16 miles an hour. So I was just working so hard to like just think about being fast on the bike.
So I think our advice is get behind Jay Smitty as often as you can riding your bike because she is something else.
Especially in races.
I love that. All right. Your last insight, Jim.
Okay, so I think probably my last one here is that, it's such a shout out to all these athletes that we talked about. I'm just continually inspired by people. So Training Peaks has this little thing for coaches. They have this little notification settings. And so I typically will check notifications, probably 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. And then I'll come back and get on at like maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'll often see like 2 or 3 workouts from some of my athletes that had done something in the evening, and then they get up super early before work and they went and they did maybe a bike or something at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so meanwhile, I haven't done any workouts, or just kind of went to bed or whatever. And they come back and there's 2 or 3 workouts from these athletes. So anyway, just people are working really hard. They made this commitment to commit to the process and they're doing it. So I don't know. It's amazing.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I think sometimes I get almost a little bit overwhelmed by how many notifications there are in my Training Peaks for my athletes. And then I look at them and I realize every single one of these notifications is someone that I'm helping out, actually getting after it and doing it. And then all of that feeling of overwhelm goes away because it's so inspiring to see, wow, everyone's just following through on the commitments that they made to themselves, to their coach, to their community, and following their goals. I noticed this especially last week. I was in California, so I was on Pacific time, and most of my athletes are on the East Coast. So if I was getting up even at like 6 a.m. Pacific time, that's 9 a.m. on the East Coast. And again, 25 athletes have done like 30 workouts usually by that time. And it's just so cool to see that pretty much every day.
It's very cool. So keep at it, peeps. It's just amazing. You guys inspire us.
So with that, I think, shall we get to our topic of the day?
We should get to our topic of the day, which we have sort of introduced, but we're going to introduce it in another way as well. So we have mentioned that the race season is getting super close. And like a lot of our athletes are starting to see these race simulations. We do these race simulations 12 weeks out and 8 weeks out. So some of my athletes are even 8 weeks out for races, which is really amazing. It's like, it feels like this long winter and then suddenly like, oh my God, races are here. Are you kidding? But these race sims, they're just like these perfect days, like test our physical and metabolic fitness, as well as all of our fun and fancy race gear. But race sims are this example of a good type of stress, which is called eustress, which is spelled EUSTRESS. This is a new term for me. I'll admit I learned this week. Have you ever heard of eustress before?
No, but it's our new segment, word of the day, eustress.
Eustress. Because eustress. So eustress in the context of exercise is usually about feeling challenged, but also doable and tends to lead to strengthening and growth. So tough workouts like race sims, like they send you to the edge of your abilities, but they also kind of hopefully leave you happy and confident as well. So it's a good type of stress. So anyway, big goals, long training blocks, races, these are all examples and opportunities to experience eustress, but there's also opportunities to experience the other side, which is distress. And that's sort of the unhealthy stress and we want to talk about today. So, and sort of then on top of all that, just from workouts, races, and blocks, is that a lot of people in our space tend to be a little bit highly amped, shall we say? So high achievers, that resonates. So this is our blessing and our curse. And we all know the good side, but also the dark side is that all this ambition and drive can sometimes shift us from eustress to distress. And then the distress really become a center stage in our lives. So if you can relate to any of that, this episode is for you.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. And I think a couple weeks ago on our episode on good data and bad data, we talked about Training Peaks' metric TSS, which is training stress score. And basically that's just a metric that aims to capture the physiological load of a workout. And it's based on time and intensity and your threshold values. And it's helpful because it rolls up into these other metrics that can help us understand both short and long-term fitness and fatigue metrics. But that doesn't capture everything. And so Jim has actually coined us a new term. This was that long time ago, and I think I'll share the story of how TSS is in everything, and we need a new term.
Right. So so many years ago, in my coaching career, I began to notice that, like you said, TSS is just one piece of the athlete puzzle. And so we were quantifying the load on the body, but not necessarily on the mind or the holistic body. So as I saw athletes struggle with workouts and the plan, it was often not the workouts themselves, but rather sort of that life circumstances that made training kind of difficult or impossible. So normal daily life is full of stress, both professional and personal. And so really this became the biggest factor in how much an athlete could progress over that day, that week, that month, that year. So anyway, we needed a new data metric to capture life's daily stress, or distress, as we're now calling it, and thus Life Stress Score, or LSS, was born.
Exactly. So just like TSS, training stress score, we now have LSS. And today's episode is all about a deep dive onto just what LSS is, what its impact is, how to track it, and most importantly, how to manage it or reduce it, or how to change training in the context of LSS, which is going to be really, really important for our athletes. And we'll note, LSS is currently a trademark term of the Endurance Tribe. It is not officially copyrighted, but we think it should be. So if you Google Life Stress Score, I don't think you'll find too much, but we're hoping that this can give you some context to think a little bit about, your own training and your life. So first question that we're going to go over is...
First question is, so what is LSS?
Yeah, so maybe to define it, as we just said, training stress score captures physical strain, but LSS is all about that mental and emotional strain that's brought on by life just being hard. Life is hard for everyone at different times, but that's the focus here. So a couple things that we could think about contributing to high LSS. We could think about travel, for example, can be really stressful. Different types of negative emotions brought on by things in life like anxiety or uncertainty. It could be stress from work, stress from family, stress from relationships. It could be disappointing things happening, tragedies close to home in the world. Basically just anything that works against you feeling really calm and cool and collected. And I think what's tough and important to keep in mind is that we say there's LSS and then there's TSS and physical, mental, emotional stress. But at the end of the day, stress actually can impact your body in the same way, no matter what type it is. So if something really upsetting happens to you, that can actually have some of the same physiological effects of, doing a really, really hard workout. It might feel a little bit different, but in terms of the hormonal response to stress, that's what we want to be thinking about. So if we want to dive into that science just a little bit, again, we are not experts in this by any means, but we've experienced enough life stress, I guess, that we've done some of our own deep dives.
We're not scientists, but we do have a new PhD in the house. So maybe I think we're really qualified to talk about this.
I am a doctor, not the kind that you want to talk to you about doctor things. But anyway, I can talk to you a little bit about cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone that's both produced and released by your adrenal glands. And so what cortisol does, it has a lot of different really important roles in the body. It can suppress inflammation in your bodily tissues. It controls metabolism in your muscles and your fat and your liver and bones. It regulates your blood sugar, your blood pressure, and it impacts your sleep-wake cycle. And it's important that you actually need some cortisol. If you don't have enough, that can be really bad for your health. So you want to have the right balance of cortisol, again, to impact that sleep-wake cycle. If you have too low cortisol, you can just be exhausted and sleep the entire day, for example. Or you could have low blood pressure. That's what happens if cortisol is too low. But when stress from life is really, really high, you'll find that cortisol is really high. And then there can just be this cascade of physiological effects that can happen. So maybe now we could talk a little bit about just how LSS impacts training. So first thing to think about when LSS is high is that your sleep is often impacted. So just like we were talking about with cortisol impacting that sleep-wake cycle, anecdotally, I've seen a lot of athletes and myself have issues with, insomnia if you have really high cortisol. So either it's really, really hard to wind down and fall asleep because your mind is just totally going too fast and your body's really amped, or you might end up waking up really, really early and not being able to fall back asleep. That's because cortisol is spiking too high in the morning. So that's something that can definitely come out of super, super high life stress.
Yeah, super high cortisol. It's like having like 4 espresso shots before trying to go to bed.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Another thing that we see often when life stress is high is we'll see resting heart rate go up often and HRV going down. So those are both metrics that, again, capture how much stress your body is under. And if you're wearing an Oura Ring or a Whoop or a Garmin, there's different ways to track this. We talked about how both of these can be useful. Again, a little bit mixed on HRV, but I've at least seen anecdotally this pattern. We've seen immunity go down. So often people will get sick if they're really, really run down. That can be a big response. We can see training responses go down. So just your workouts really are not feeling that good. Your paces are falling apart. Your heart rate is higher than it should be during workouts, so they might feel extra challenging. And again, this all makes a lot of sense when cortisol is totally amped because your entire homeostasis is thrown in disarray. So that's something big to be thinking about. I think another thing we could think about is we've also had athletes experience a lot more GI issues when stress is high. So cortisol can impact all of that, either with or without activity. Again, if you're having a lot of GI issues, that makes training feel worse and it can make it really hard to get the right fuel in. So those things are all big to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I also think we're finding too that science has really been very clear on this. There's a real direct correlation between stress and injury. So we're this highly tuned being, but when we have stress or negative emotions or high cortisol, this tends to create this wrinkle in the neurological pathway. And sort of that millisecond detour can just really cause problems. Particularly for me, I find it doing trail running. Like for me, trail running is a highly coordinated activity, very, very challenging. I need to sort of be on my game. And it's often funny that every time I maybe make a stumble, it's maybe because I've had some sort of negative or emotional thought before that. And it's just enough time, that millisecond, just to kind of throw like the whole neurological pathways from my brain telling my feet what to do. So I find that very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally see what you're saying with trail running there. And I think we could see that too, especially even with just like swimming, a very technique sport. When you have to be dialed, it's really hard to turn your brain off. So we'll probably talk about this a little bit later. But if you're thinking about movement that is helpful when you're in periods of really high life stress, for me, it might just be like a super easy run walk on the roads. I don't have to think about my footing that much. It's flat. There's not a lot of strategy involved. That's something that I might think about, given that these high cognitive demand sports, that's going to be a little bit harder when your life stress is super high.
And also getting back to, we have this series of run drills that we encourage people to do. Not everybody does, but that can be something when you're just amped up or you just don't have anything left. But go to your regular run spot or just even out your door and just do some running drills, right? Work on some technique. And that's super helpful. And those are often really good workouts. People say, just doing 15 minutes of drills, honestly, is a really good workout. And I don't want to discount that 15 minutes. It's super valuable.
Mm-hmm. It's nice too, because when you're doing those drills, there's not the same metric of like, wow, I know that my zone 2 heart rate is totally off right now or my pace is slow. It's like, how do you quantify how well you did your skips? You don't really have to quantify it because that's not what it's about. So think about the intention of those drills. I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, don't turn your Garmin on during the drills. Just go do your drills and just do it. Like, oh my God, it actually happened, coach.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yep, exactly. And one more key point that I think I'll throw in here in just describing how LSS impacts training is that LSS can compromise your training adaptations independently of big volume or intensity. So you don't have to be doing a race sim to feel the effects of high LSS during a workout. It can even just be going out for your standard, hour bike ride or 4-mile run. If there's a ton of life stress going on, that's probably going to feel worse and it's going to feel a lot different. So, these things can sometimes go hand in hand. Maybe your life stress could be brought on by a really busy schedule and trying to fit in heavy training, but it can really happen anytime. So don't think it's only going to happen when you're in super, super high training loads.
Yeah, I noticed it early on when I first started triathlon. I had a really busy business I was running, and just on days when I was super, super, super busy and things were really, really stressful, and then I had a workout maybe that night, I just couldn't do it. And I thought, well, what is this? Like, I've just been sitting around all day long. What do you mean I can't get on my bike and do my threshold intervals? But it was always confusing to me, like, why can't I do this? But then we just realized, like you said, it's like stress is stress is stress. We have a certain amount of stress in our bucket of water every day. And if you dump it all out at work, then there's nothing left over for anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I think we probably could say that LSS is going to impact motivation too. And that's totally reasonable. Your body's actually fighting just to like stay alive through the day. And so having that extra boost to go out for threshold intervals at 6 p.m., I am not surprised that was a lot hard to get.
Mm. And that's what I think where the walk comes in too. I love the walk. I'm a big promoter of the walk. When LSS is high, go for a walk.
Yes, 100% agree. Ideally in nature if you can.
Yes.
So how can you track LSS? Because sometimes you can sort of feel it. It can manifest differently for different people. You might kind of feel more anxious or more down or just on edge or really exhausted, even if you're getting some sleep. Sometimes it's pain. And for me, it has been like pain in my upper back or my chest. So I'll occasionally experience that. Again, GI issues. But we also could talk about just some objective indicators. So going back to that data, resting heart rate, HRV, sleep quality and quantity, workout metrics, those data points, even though you don't want them to completely rule what you're doing, if they all seem to be off and you can also identify stressors in your life that are occurring, that might be a good explainer for why. And I find that for me, sometimes it's validating to say like, okay, well, I know there's a lot of stress in my life right now and my resting heart rate is up. Maybe it's related. Maybe I'm not just crazy. And so if you can just kind of bring some objective data into the picture, sometimes I think that can be helpful. But I think like we've said before, tracking LSS and looking at data, one of the most valuable things that you can do is just kind of communicate with your coach about it. So be realistic about what's going on in your life. And you can just share, hey, I am having a super tough week. Work is really, really busy right now. And often you'll find that we as coaches are super excited to jump in and say like, hey, let's cut the intensity or let's modify that track workout to a 3-mile easy run, something like that. So your comments and perceived feeling is going to be kind of the best indicator that we have. And then if you need more hard data, go into those metrics that we just talked about.
Yeah, always talk to your coach. I mean, I love it because it just means that our athletes are aware. And I think the self-awareness will pay off on so many different levels. And so when somebody says, hey, I'm feeling stressed out or this is happening, and I'm like, great, let's change things around and get you back on track. So
yeah. And I'll note too that it's a lot better to mention something when it's just a little bit off rather than going to rock bottom. If things feel a little bit off, sometimes it's a matter of like I had an athlete recently who just had a really, really busy work week and was struggling with getting to the pool twice a week. So we just said, all right, for 2 weeks, we're just going to get to the pool once a week. And that was actually all we needed. Like it was just that one small shift. And now she's doing great. She's back in the pool twice a week. Whereas if you just let this life stress build and build and build and build, you might get to a point where you're like, actually, I need to take a week off of no training whatsoever. And ideally, we want to help you avoid that unless that's really what you need. So chipping away at it when it's a little bit more minor, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, I love that point where it's like, if you nip in the bud, it's often just a minor adjustment. It feels like it's just a big deal because again, we tend to be these really high overachievers. Perfectionism tends to come out really strongly. But if we get it early enough, it's like you said, like maybe we just drop one swim and then suddenly it's like, oh, the problem is solved. Like, this is great. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that vein, Jim, why should we reduce LSS? Because I could imagine a world in which we're all high achievers and we just power through and we're like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then it's eventually not fine. So tell us why.
Well, I'll talk about it from an athletic standpoint. And some of these are just very, very obvious. But, the relaxed muscles, we're more fluid and we're more coordinated. We have more strength. We have more endurance. Like when we're relaxed. We also just tend to react a lot quicker when we are relaxed. And if you think about like, especially this is really important in a race situation, if things happen or your body, whatever, something's just happening and it always happens in a race. So it can be a small race, but just being in that relaxed state will allow you to make better decisions during a race. And also being relaxed, you burn less energy. So a good reason to relax, and especially in a race or workout. And also it'll improve your concentration and focus, which would just affect your confidence. So we want happy, confident athletes.
And we can think about LSS as more of like a chronic stress or it's brought on by life, but it's the exact same type of stressful emotions that you might find right before a race. So if you find that you're really, really anxious, like either the whole week leading up to a race or the morning of the race or the day before, keep in mind that that is kind of working against your physiology. So figuring out some tools to avoid getting really, really stressed out, that can help you in a race setting. that can help you in a life setting, that can kind of help you. Like if you're going to go public speak, it's all the same type of thing with figuring out how to just calm your nervous system. So you want to think about it in a lot of these different domains. And I think that's a nice segue into just talking about, okay, how can we actually reduce LSS? So interestingly, we can go back to TSS, training stress score. And if your TSS is really, really high, and let's say you're hitting a plateau because your form's really off, you need more recovery. So here, you need either higher mental recovery or some higher mental fitness to change the equation and not be left with a big, big hole for life stress. So how do we do mental recovery when we're coaches thinking about a physical training plan? I usually recommend switching to just easy training or active recovery for a couple of days. I'll often recommend maybe even taking some time off a dedicated training plan, depending on where an athlete is at, because sometimes it can feel worse and worse to keep looking at the plan and saying like, oh, I'm not hitting these workouts. Instead, saying let's go unstructured for a couple of days, I think can be really, really useful. I think also moving back into some of the activities that you like to do the most. So for some people, that might be yoga, or that might be trail running, or that might be hiking. And maybe normally you're training for like a road 5K or a triathlon or something, but think about those things that really fill your cup. And the good thing is these are still building really good zone 1-2 fitness. So it's not like it's nothing. But the biggest thing is that you want to try and just focus on that joy and community through movement, because that's a really good way to increase the mental recovery piece of this. I think something else is you can make your mental fitness higher. That's another way to kind of change that equation where LSS may not impact you so much. So think about meditation, breath work, journaling, therapy, all of these things. These are useful, kind of all the time. But keep in mind that even the most breath work in the world is not going to help you when really, really stressful things happening. So you need to also reduce your life stress. But we do have a couple of recommendations that we can kind of put your way for building that mental fitness. The first one is an app called Headspace, and it's a really good way to do some easy guided meditations. If you're like me and you only want to spend like 5 minutes on meditation, you can just hop in the Headspace app and they'll give you a 5-minute one. So highly recommend that.
Right. They just give you a good recommendation, a good intro into like, what is this thing called breath work or self-awareness or mindfulness? They've sort of consolidated all these different, levels of loving kindness, meditation, all this stuff into one place. So you can go on there. There's actually stuff in there specifically for athletes as well. So yeah, big shout out to Headspace. And we also have a few book recommendations as well. One that Katie, I think you have this one as well. It's called The Brave Athlete, Calm the F Down and Rise to the Occasion. And this is by Simon Marshall, who's also a PhD as well. So there you go. And Leslie Patterson. Leslie Patterson is a multi-exterior champion and also a screenwriter as well. So a really interesting couple. And if you want sort of a background of like, how does your brain work, the chimp brain and the professor brain, and it's just got a lot of good background. And it's all written from an athletic perspective. So that one I think should be in everybody's bookshelf. And then if you want to dive a little deeper into just like meditation, there's one called Wherever You Go, There You Are. It's written by John Kabat-Zinn. He's an OG in that space. And we put a link in here for Amazon. And also it's shout out to Spotify. So there's a lot of free audiobooks now on Spotify. So it's free on there. And then one I found, which is really interesting, was a little illustrated book. And it's called There's No Right Way to Meditate. And so if you're just interested in all meditation, it's a very small book and got really cool illustrations. It's not preachy at all and very inviting. And then another one that people may have seen if you follow Huberman is this thing called the physiological sigh. And we put a YouTube link to it. But essentially, it's this way to do some real-time stress management. And it's this one long, deep inhale through the nose, and then you hold, and then you do another short inhale, and then you do an exhale. And that's been shown from legit neuroscientists to really help lower your stress level.
I love that. Yeah. And I think all these things, like you kind of have to figure out what combination worked the best for you. For some people, it's going to be meditation and breath work. For some people, it's going to be journaling. For some people, it's going to be none of the above and it's something else. But just try all the things if you're struggling with this. And even if you're not, even if things are really good, that can actually be a great time to just try this stuff, because then you can kind of draw on it if you're having a particularly hard time. So if you develop, a breathwork practice or a meditation practice and you're just doing it for 5 minutes a day when things are good, it's really going to help you out when things are not so good. A couple other quick things that I'll just put in here is think about incorporating other things into your life that bring you a lot of joy and community. So good food, time with friends and family. I think that can be really, really helpful with reducing life stress. Jim, I think you put on here, listen to music. That's a great one too that I love.
I love music and classical music for some reason. That calms my beast. I don't know why, but it's always calmed my beast. And the other one I would love is that sometimes I'll just remember that like smiling is a great stress reducer. And so I'll either watch a comedy special, like say on Netflix, or even put out a comedy playlist. And so anyway, laughter is great medicine.
I love that. And then the last one we have is, instead of self-help, you can also be helping others. So think about giving back to the community. I find that that's a really good way to kind of get your mind off your own life stress, is to just try and help other people. So that's a big one. Okay, so another thing we wanted to talk about is just how we think about LSS as coaches and how we can factor it into training. Like we said before, it's really important to keep an open dialogue. So I do that with my athletes. I have a weekly check-in survey where they tell me like 1 to 5, where are they on physical health, and 1 to 5, where are they on mental health. And I think an important disclaimer here is that a coach is not a therapist. We're not here to be your therapist. But we can use that information about your life for the training context. And I still think that that's really, really important. So just knowing that someone's mental health or life stress is a 2 is like, all right, we are going to make some changes here. Even if I don't need to know exactly why they're at the 2, it just means let's make those changes. And then as a coach, similarly, I'm going to adapt that training plan, more easy stuff, more AR, more unstructured adventure time.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. I think as coaches, we get so good at reading the tea leaves and, get maybe a short phrase from somebody and you realize, oh, wait a minute, that's a different phrase they used last week. Let's drill into that. Let's see what's going on there.
So, there's no exclamation points. Interesting.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. Yeah. Or they just write something that right just like tired. And you're like, wait, this athlete always feels great and now they feel tired. And so we'll start digging into some of the other metrics and realize, oh yeah, they've been on a big training block here, and maybe also something else is going on in life as well too. So maybe their LSS is high. We know their TSS is high. So time to change up the plan a little bit, build in some recovery.
Yeah. So I think that's almost the end of our thoughts on LSS, but we do always like to throw in some anecdotes. So I thought maybe I could share a little bit about my own kind of LSS journeys. We've alluded to like athletes in our network being people that take a lot of stuff on and can be kind of type A about it. And that's certainly me. I will be the first to admit that I can be very type A about a lot of things in my life. And sometimes that gets me a lot of success, but sometimes it can lead to periods of super, super high life stress. So I would say that's been kind of a feature of my training over the years, is there's always these different pockets of time. But I've talked about this, I think, on our episode Lessons from 2023. I'm going to quickly go over some themes from that story again. But when I was getting ready for Ironman Lake Placid last year, I had a really, really tough period of life stress. A lot of things happened at the same time. It's probably 6 weeks of sustained, really, really high life stress. And I did not listen to all the things that I just told you that you should do. And instead was just like, head down, I'm going to do this. Was seeing the wheels sort of start to come off the bus. The training was not going as well as I wanted it to be. And then finally, I dug myself into a hole where I was like, oh, I really don't think I can do any training right now. So it really brought me to a point where stress was so high and it was impacting me so directly, kind of physiologically, that I really, really needed to take a longer break. And so what that break we worked together, Jim, on figuring out like, okay, what changes are we going to make here? And the change that we made was me skipping my week 4 race sim. So the week 4 race simulation, historically the most important workout leading up to a race. I was supposed to go to Lake Placid. I didn't do it. And the good news is I actually still had a pretty good day at Lake Placid. And I think that's because I finally said like, all right, I'm going to start honoring this life stress. But I think in another world, I could have imagined just continuing to like push until my body actually maybe broke on race day or right before it. I think I saved things just in time during this. But ideally, if I were to do the whole thing again, I probably would have dialed things back a little bit earlier, because then I wouldn't have, it was sort of mentally a little bit stressful to say, wow, I didn't actually do this race sim. I haven't gone to the course to practice. I don't know what it's going to be like. Probably would have been better to just dial things back when it started to get stressful and try to do some physiological size and all of that. But the point is then thinking a lot about managing that life stress was a way to come back. And I've then kind of pulled out all those tools ever since. And now I'll be the first one to say, hey, I need to go off plan. I need to have a couple of weeks of just trail running and hikes and good food and family. And then that'll usually get me back to where I need to be.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about this, like this, it takes a lot of courage to say, I need to change things up a little bit here. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of conditioning that we do to ourselves, which is like, I'm this type of athlete, I'm this type of person. And so just getting beyond that conditioning is really hard sometimes. And I think also just, you are a coach, and so you are highly visible and people are watching. And so you can see why people just continue to do, because it's very safe to do the things you've always been doing, right? Even if those things are really kind of like not serving you well, it's very easy to hold on to, whether that's a narrative or your habits or your behaviors or whatever. It's just a safe place to be, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. So hats off for you for finally saying, okay, right, I'm gonna step in here, I'm gonna break the cycle. This is a fundamental shift for me. So hats off to you for doing that.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, and I would say too, like another life stress period was me finishing this dissertation. And now that I've chilled out and taken that stressor out, my sleep and my HRV and resting heart rate are all better than they've ever been in my entire life. And it only took like a week of having the PhD done to do that. So,
and I heard you went swimming.
Yes, and I got back to swimming. So all this stuff swings around. Yeah, as you know, my swimming has been inconsistent, but here I am 2 this week. So that's LSS. Upshot is definitely keep your coach informed, and we're with you if you're struggling through this. That's what a coach is for, is to kind of hold your hand through life stress and at least help you on the trading side of things. But again, person first, athlete second means that we're always going to be thinking about that.
Everybody has the LSS.
Yes,
it's just this ebb and flow of like sometimes it's low and sometimes it's high, and when it's high, we're here to help out.
Totally. All right. So should we do some listener questions?
Yeah, because the first question, of course, is, okay, what's this dissertation thing? What's this doctorate thing you're doing? Well, let us know. Your fans need to know.
I was hesitant about having this question in here, but it has been asked so many times that I feel like it needs maybe 30 seconds of airtime. So I just finished up my PhD in political science. I wrote a dissertation that's all about how the public reacts to democratic backsliding. So that's the slowly weakening process of democracy. And I do a lot of public opinion work, both in the United States and abroad. So if you want to know what that is and how to have some solutions about it, then you can read my very, very long dissertation.
And I think it's quite timely, this whole democracy thing.
It's not that, a little relevant, but that's what my dissertation is about. On to the next topic. So we got a question that we've had this question a few times. It's, when should we be doing strength workouts? So a lot of our athletes have doubles. They have a strength workout in, and then the same day they usually have some cardio. Do you recommend it before cardio, after cardio? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I always start with the first one I always say is the best strength routine is the one you do. And so I've sort of bumped back to that because we are managing 3 other sports. But ideally, I like to do strength after mostly a cardio, because there is some physiological science behind that, is that it has been shown that it's better to try to, if you can, ideally do strength work after your cardio.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. And I think I also think about it as, you can only have one big rock in a day. So if you have a really, really hard bike workout and a strength, you want to do the bike workout first, because otherwise it's going to be inhibited. On the other hand, if it's the off season and your goal is to be building a ton of really good muscle and you're just doing like sporadic Z2, then sure, do your strength workout first and make that your big rock of the day. But for most of our athletes now, you can be doing strength later.
Yeah. So it's really a context of like, what's the period of the year? So this right now, I guess with race sims and we're sort of getting to thick of things, like probably strength takes a little bit of backseat, comes a little bit more of a maintenance thing, and then typically done after cardio. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Last question is super shoes. Should we be running in super shoes? How often should we be running in them? If you don't know, super shoes are usually these carbon plate running shoes, which a lot of the elite runners or just amateurs too are wearing to be faster, for example, in like marathon road racing. But what are your thoughts on super shoes?
Yeah, triathletes love to talk about their super shoes now. You have super shoes, right?
Well, I can give my story on super shoes as part of an answer to this question, and then I want to hear your answer. But I saw the Hoka Carbon X2s a while ago, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I was like, these are so cool. I like how they look. They look like elf shoes or something. And so I bought them. And I exclusively ran in those, which is not what you should do. Like, I did all of my running mileage in one pair of shoes, which was my Hoka Carbon X's. And I ended up doing some damage to my foot. I started getting some pretty bad plantar fasciitis going on. Went and got it checked out. They're like, yeah, this is because you're a bonehead and you are wearing only carbon shoes for your Zone 2 easy runs. So I've taken a break from them. Now I think I'm probably at a place where I could do super shoes if I wanted to, like for a workout or something, but I am not wearing them for everything. And I raced in non-super shoes for both Ironmans last year, and I think it was totally fine.
Yeah, I think you just sort of answered the question, is that these carbon plates, what they'll do is they shut off the stimulation of the foot muscles. And so while you feel fast, you're just not getting the proper stimulus. So science hasn't come around and saying, we should do 80% in regular and 20%. There's no percentage right now, but I think our guidance is that do most of your stuff in your regular shoes. And if you do plan to use super shoes, do some workouts if you're going to race in them, obviously, so you don't get blisters, figure out how they react to your feet. But probably, I don't know, I'd say 90% of the time do in regular shoes. What's your thought if we wanted to put a percentage on it?
Yeah, I think 90 is probably about right. 80 to 90%. We could definitely check in with our runners, Kevin and Elena, about how often they're using super shoes. But I think the other thing too is, if you feel like it gives you a mental boost and you think you're faster, there's something to that. So put them on race day, but you have to have practiced beforehand. And we would say that the science isn't strong enough that we're saying it's going to revolutionize your Ironman marathon where your goal is to just not walk. It's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so challenge of the week. We have 2 more segments, challenge and gear. My challenge of the week, this actually goes back to our conversation about LSS, is think about a journaling practice. So I have done this a little bit recently where if you feel like there's a lot on your mind, sometimes it's tough because you can bring that with you to your workouts. And I think that can actually contribute to, for example, let's say you've got a lot on your mind, you go for a run, you're like, I'm all angry, I'm processing various things. And then you go out and your heart rate is up and you're just pounding the pavement really hard. So a journaling practice is a great way to kind of sit down, write down your negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and then leave them on the paper and be like, I am not going to take that on right now, and go out for your run. And someone recommended this to me. I was so skeptical. I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And then I did it and then it worked. And I was like, damn it, it worked. So I'm going to pass this on to others. It's a really nice way to just still be present in your workout.
Yeah, I'm still on that. Damn it, does it work? But yeah, I believe you. It does work.
Yep.
So all right, that's my challenge. And my challenge, sort of in the same vein, is that, and I try to do this sometimes. I don't do this all the time, but just in the last 5 minutes of cooling down for my ride or my run, just trying to think about like, what was I grateful for today? Maybe it was just on this run or on this ride or just something in my life, and just to sort of, as I'm winding down my body and my mind and sort of setting myself up for the next workout. So
yeah, and 2 points about these are like you might try journaling and you might try a gratitude practice, and both of them might not work for you. That's okay too. It's going to be something. Everyone has something that is going to work. I remember I've tried gratitude a little bit before, and of course I'm very grateful for many things, but when I'm frustrated, I get super snarky at my grateful mind, and I'm like, rah, like I am not. So I think just the point is like try out different things and see what works out the best for you to try and lower that LSS. But the point is that it's lowering. Okay, we're leaving all the stress on the page. We're moving into a non-stressful topic, hopefully, which is gear pick of the week. In our last segment, Jim, what is your gear pick of the week?
So my gear pick of the week, I was asked recently by somebody, said, what do you use for your bike shorts? And I said, I use the ASOS bib shorts. And I put a link in here, and that's the only ones I use. I've used so many other brands throughout the years, and now I've just made it super easy for myself when I need to buy a new pair of bike shorts. I just go to ASOS, and they're actually the middle of the line. They're not the low end, but they're not their high end. And I find that their high end shorts are actually not that comfortable. So it's that mid range. So they're very reasonably priced. And there's an outlet, usually you can get a sale on them, but I don't think you'll regret getting the ASOS shorts.
Yeah, plus one of those, I wear ASOS shorts a lot. I have a couple different shorts that I recommend on my female athlete gear page, but ASOS is up there. So highly recommend. And again, don't get the nicest ones. Those are not comfortable. It's either the mid or even the entry tier for me have been the most comfortable.
Yep.
Okay, my recommendation is I travel a lot. If you're traveling a lot and you want to strength train, it can be hard sometimes to get to a gym that has everything that you need. But I recently got a set of large, skinny resistance bands. So these are cool. They're not the mini bands that we use often for glute activation, but the long, skinny ones are really helpful for simulating different types of work that you would do like with a cable machine. So I usually do a lot of work with a cable machine, but if you're thinking about like different things targeting your core or twisting or whatever, you can do a lot with a skinny resistance band attached to like a banister or something like that. So again, it's amazing to lift really heavy and get in the gym whenever you can, but sometimes you got to do something and you're making it work in some random Airbnb. So I would say get those skinny resistance bands. They're very lightweight. You can throw them in your bag and they're super easy to bring with you. That's just a rec from my strength trainer. So
yeah, great. And do you also do like a door handle or something?
Yeah, a door handle is great. These are also, we were talking about swimming, back to swimming. These can be a nice way to really warm up and activate those shoulders with a skinny resistance band. So really good bang for your buck in terms of like a good item to have for strength and mobility.
And can you work your glute med with them as well?
You sure can. You can do everything with the glute med. That's awesome in the world. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we did everything.
Yeah, we went the distance, didn't we?
We did. Yeah. And hopefully we're feeling low life stress. Hopefully this good trajectory continues for all of our athletes and for us with, on the up and up. But yeah, we think this topic is so important because it does impact training all the time. And if you're having high life stress, we're with you and sending you good breathwork vibes as you get through it.
Yeah, and if you have any other things that work for you, something we haven't brought up here in the episode, give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from our listeners, and again, appreciate your attention.
Yep. Thank you all.